Welcome to the Grow Your Practice podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Chad Madden, owner of Madden Physical Therapy and Breakthrough. Join me each week as we dive into the best practices, systems, principles, tips, and tricks to help you grow your private practice. Today's topic is how to incentivize your team. And I know this just came up on a previous implementation call. So what we're going to do today is talk about incentivization, the different aspects of that, what I've seen working in private practice right now. So we're going to cover what is it, why it's important, who it's for, the type of practice that it works well in, that I've seen it work well in. And also I'll cover some pitfalls, and then we'll walk through a basic exercise as well in terms of implementation. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A, and Yehi will help moderate here as always. And so let's get into it. So incentivization, what does that mean? Typically, when we're talking about private practice, there's a portion of the compensation that is fixed, and then there is something additional that can be earned. You might refer to it as a bonus or maybe some sort of commission, and there's a scale, sliding scale. So in its extreme, I've seen clinics, the late Jeff Ostrowski's clinic, where they had their directors, and I believe many of their clinicians as well, were on nearly 100% of variable, right? So when they were profitable, there was greater distribution. When they weren't profitable, the distribution was less. And in those situations, at that end, that is the safest for the practice. It's the most stable for the financial health of the practice. The other thing that happens, why is that important? Well, everybody has skin in the game, and many of their management problems went away fairly quickly. On the other end, we can have fixed salaries that get us into some trouble. So what we've seen in private practice are some areas where there's a declining reimbursement over time, specifically the Northeast in the US. So declining reimbursements, long-standing, tenured, for lack of a better term, clinicians who are, have been in a practice for 10, 20 years plus. And what that does is there's no compensation for the declining reimbursement. So the services are worth less today, and there's upward pressure on cost over time with raises and everything that has happened, and that also leads to some issues. So it's tough to get all of your team members to switch over to 100% commission tomorrow. Right? That's a heavy lift. So what does the balance look like? And we'll talk about that here. The biggest thing probably is that skin in the game, aligning the purposes, or getting everybody in alignment. Great author. I know Bob's on here. Bob has heard me talk about this before, but Jack Stack wrote 2 books. The Great Game of Business and Stake in the Outcome, I believe, is the other one. And that is the story of one business owner, happened to be a parts manufacturer, but for International Harvester in the 80s, but overnight they lost their business or their main customer, and they completely revolutionized their business and survived because they made everybody an owner to a degree. And the big point there is a lot of the problems because everybody was aligned, from the C-suite executives the whole way down to the janitor and every other team member in between, that everybody started thinking like an owner and learning financial literacy relative to a business, et cetera. Incentivization programs, and we'll talk about variations of that, but they work best in situations where the team member is more autonomous and really more educated. So if I'm your clinician and I really don't understand anything because of lack of transparency around income and expenses, it's going to be very difficult for you to roll out a program where I can't really see the scoreboard unless you do something like visits alone. And we'll talk about that in the pitfalls here in a second. But for owners that are the micromanager type, or they're like delegating or telling all the time, giving direction only, rolling out an incentive program can be challenging. And like Jeff Ostrowski example that I shared before, their directors were highly autonomous. They had a lot of freedom of how they wanted to set up their treatment schedules, billing parameters, documentation, everything across the board. They had a lot of autonomy, and it worked better there. Yeah. Some of the pitfalls that I've seen, number one is you can actually, if you have a fixed bonus system, you can bonus away more than 100% of your profitability. Guilty as charged. I've done it. It is not a great, it's not fun to do. But we had implemented at one point basically like a threshold. When a therapist did this many visits a week, they would receive a fixed bonus. It might have been $400, something like that per week. And then we got to the end of the month and the money was gone. And we were like, what is going on here? And then we happened to notice that a lot of our clinicians went from billing 4 unit visits down to 2 unit visits for the bulk of their treatments, and that didn't work financially. So I'll talk about a sliding scale percentage of profitability that I've seen work the best. But that is pitfall number one is you need a system that is based on profitability. You have to be profit. You have to reach a certain threshold of profitability before you're paying out, especially a clinical bonus, because you can have a slippery slope there and get yourself in trouble. The other thing is if I can offer a disclaimer, we all have different practice acts and employment laws. You want to run those by an employment attorney. We can make recommendations there if you're interested. But yeah, I am not an employment attorney, and you want to make sure that it's flush with your and copacetic with your practice act. The other one is the missing steps. So I talk about this book often. I actually have one extra copy with me right here, but who Randy Street, Jeff Smart. And you can't put an incentivization program in, and I see a lot of owners that try to do this. They want to incentivize, they roll out a plan, and then they think it fixes everything else, all the other processes within personnel. That's it helps, but it's not siloed off where you fix this and then everything else changes. And some of those are sourcing. Sourcing is how you run ads or how you work with different education programs. Yes, incentivization is going to help you attract talent to a degree, but it's not going to fix that problem 100%. But so it's not going to fix sourcing. That's a separate issue. It's not going to change your interview process, right? It's going to change the very end when you're making a presentation, an offer, but it's not going to fix if you have an issue with presenting. We use a scorecard system and quarterly review system that should be in there, and an incentivization program helps with the quarterly scorecard review because that, at least in our situation, that team member is getting bonused every month based on what they've done. So we can look at that very rare extreme circumstance where somebody would be green, they would be achieving their goals within the clinic, and they wouldn't have received some sort of bonus. Yeah. So that's usually an alignment, and it helps with the process, the review process. It doesn't replace it. And the other one is what we're typically looking for as a practice owner is a accountability with metrics, right? So our team members, and we have right today we have 108 team members in my practice, and every single one of them has some sort of incentivization plan for their position. So from PTs, PTAs, aides, we roll out OT here, which it looks like we might. There will be an incentivization program there, billing, marketing, reception, etc. Even our clinical directors are on an incentivization plan. There's a balance. And the other thing that I noticed is how poorly we are as an industry at presenting. So if you're a sports fan and you're watching ESPN and it comes across as, well, the NFL I know will do, here's the contract value, here's guaranteed pay, right? Oddly, we kind of have the same thing. And there's industry wide, and I had said this with our group, our directors and my partners, and I don't think it landed at first. The example I gave is years ago, we were looking at running a national advertising program, and the person that we were going to hire, the celebrity, was Chris Evert. She was like a Wimbledon professional tennis player. And I think at the time she was like late 50s, early 60s. And the total contract value was going to be like 250K. And like 75K of that was guaranteed. So, and that was primarily for like an 8 hour film shoot. And I think there was one or two other things in there. But then there were all these additional things that she could earn, right? So she could attend a live event. She could be a podcast guest. She could like do all these other things. And, it's the same thing for our clinicians. But there's you know, nobody wants to, your clinicians don't want to turn around to their friends who just got, let's say, 80K from the hospital system, 90K from the hospital system, and say, hey, I just took a job with Bob Bocci for 65K, right? Or whatever. Even though Bob's program might have let's say a 15 or $20,000 incentivization program on top of that, right? They want to turn around and say, hey, I have the potential to earn 82K or whatever it is. Right. So like, I think we do a pretty poor job again in presenting that. And it's just something that we started looking at recently only because I'm going through it. Would love feedback if anybody has figured that out, like total contract value, how you're talking about that. But I know most of the time we're presenting salary only, and then it's like, oh, well, if this bonus happens, then that's just in addition. What happens is the way that we present it as practice owners kind of discredits or it invalidates that bonus altogether. I mean, we've had clinicians earn upwards of 30K in a year in terms of incentivization, and they're not telling their friends they're making 90K or 100K. They're telling them that I make 70, right? So that's a miss. Yeah, there is a balanced fair market value, total value of the compensation. I've had team members who left. The craziest one that I ever had was this was a clerical billing person, and they, for some odd reason, in her resignation letter, she stapled her next position, the offer letter, which I could never figure out why she did that. But we sat down and had a conversation. I said, "Do you know, like, you're actually taking a step backwards in pay here?" And she said, "Absolutely not. I'm making," and I'm just going to make numbers up, "I'm going to make $1.50 extra an hour there." And I said, well, I understand that, but we cover your full health benefits. Here's the value of that. They are going to start taking out, I think it was like $85 a week. And I was like, you're actually taking a fairly large step back. You're getting a $2.50 reduction in your health care, right? That they're going to take out. So you're going to take home less money. And she was like, well, that can't be right. And we just sat down and did the math. And I was like, you're whatever you want to do. And I said, what was your expectation of, giving me the offer? And I think what she wanted was the best of all worlds. She wanted the increased pay. So like, just realize that because you understand it, like it's a miss to assume that the team member understands that math as well.
Before we continue with this episode, here's a word about our next event, the Revenue Per Visit Virtual Summit.
Private practice owners, are you tired of declining reimbursements and shrinking margins? Join me on July 18th for the Revenue Per Visit Virtual Summit. It's a value-packed, free, online live event where you'll discover strategies that you can put into action in your practice to boost your revenue per patient and enhance your practice's profitability. You'll hear from industry leaders and private practice owners like Mark Callanan from Innovis, who will be talking about how to increase revenue with cash-based services, and Sterling Carter of Sterling PT and Wellness, who was able to increase his reimbursement rates by over 15% with providers. With more than 8 speakers, 5 hours of actionable training, and hundreds of practices in attendance, you don't want to miss out on this game-changing event. Click the link below to register today, and I'll see you there.
Thank you for listening this far. Now, back to the episode.
The other pitfall that I see often is an owner, let's say they're doing for a clinic $100,000 a month in income revenue, and the cost of that is $90K. So the margin would be $10,000. And they're going through and they're saying, okay, can I afford to hire that next therapist, even though they have the space capacity? Frequently, what they'll do is bad math, where they'll say, okay, I have $10,000 in margin, and bringing on this clinician is going to cost me a total with all benefits is going to cost me another 8K. Now I'm only going to have $2,000 in profit margin. That is not how it works. I see Bob shaking his head. Yeah. So what you need to do, and we have this pro forma tool everywhere in all of the courses, you need to be able to forecast ahead. I'm actually doing this internally here this morning. But if we're going to change pay rate or we're going to bring on a clinician, we have to be willing to look at that pro forma and say, okay, what is the increased capacity that we have to treat, the revenue potential that we're bringing in, and that we include that in the increased revenue. I see too often owners just miss that altogether. They just only look at the expense, the cost. They never look at the increased revenue that they could potentially generate and start solving that problem. And so I think that's 4 total pitfalls that I went through there. Yeah, I will talk through how we incentivize, and then we'll open this up for questions. Let's go back to that that example of the $100,000 clinic. And so we have 7 clinics right now. We run profit centers. And let's say we have one of our clinics and it's doing $100,000 a month in income, or let's say last month they did $100,000 in revenue income. The cost of that, let's say, is $85,000. So we have $15,000 in profit margin. What we will do is take a percentage of that. And in our case, it's 25%. Now, the percentage, the error that I see owners make is, I mean, if you're already paying your clinicians, let's say your market average is 90K and you're already at that 90K, maybe 25% is too high for you. So you want to come to a total market value, understand what fair market value is for your market, and you want to be able to adjust. So let's say you're way under. Let's say fair market value for your clinicians is 90K, and you have your clinicians at a base pay of 70,000. You might be even more aggressive than 25%. I mean, the highest we've ever done is 50%. But then we've adjusted down over time as we wanted to expand and really wanted to have a better margin of safety in our practice is really what it came down to. So 25% is what works for us. Then we'll take that. So that's our bonus pool. So in this case, now I'm going to have to do complex math. 15K, 25% of that is $3,750. So $3,750 goes into a bonus pool. And then we will divide that. And we take a very educated guess on contribution to profit, right? So if Bob is therapist number 1 and I'm therapist number 2, clinician number 2, and Bob saw more visits or has provided more valuable service over the cost of the month, then we're going to adjust that bonus based on his contribution to profit. We can get very close at figuring out the income, and we're agnostic to payer. So if Bob is seeing a ton of cap payers and I'm seeing uncapped payers, we don't penalize for the type of insurance, the payer mix that individual clinician has. But in the end, we can get very close to figuring out the value there of what Bob has brought to the table in terms of contribution to profit, and then the same thing for me or any other clinicians that we have, and then we will bonus out monthly that $3,750. All right, so right now, that was the overview. We went through incentivization program, what it is, why it's important, not for, 4 pitfalls, and then basically how we do that as well. I'll give you one more pitfall. The game has to be winnable. So if your max is, let's say, you would never have a clinician treat more than 60 visits in a week or 40 visits in a week, whatever it is, right? You can't make the bonus structure, and I'll be unreasonable. You can't make the bonus structure, well, this bonus activates when you hit 80 visits a week, right? Because it's never happened. So that game has to be winnable. And then recently we were having a session with our directors and managers, so front desk, billing, marketing, and each clinical director. And it's really the director's role, especially if they're being bonused, to help every person, every team member that they oversee. It's their role to help that person achieve their bonus. Like that's the right way to think about that, right? So we never want to have a bonus structure where it's the only way that I win is if Bob loses or vice versa. We want everything to be aligned. That's something else that I've seen where you can create a toxic situation if you have a weird bonus structure. Outside of that, we eliminate almost all other, like we don't pay for like workshop conversions or anything like that. That's all tied into our overall incentive program. All right, now we'll open it up for questions. What questions do you have, or wins to share, things you've tested and applied on incentivization programs, things you've learned over the years in private practice?
Can we go back just for a second, Chad? When we're looking at compensation, we're putting all of those benefits, the value of all those benefits in the package.
Yep.
So we have our vacation, the holiday, the sick leave, the life insurance, the health insurance, the dental insurance, the vision insurance. That pretty much does it. But that has a number, and
Yep.
that's the number we're starting off with our package. And then we do something very similar to what you do. We take 20% and then take a percentage of that. And then our clinic directors are incentivized two ways. One is the profitability of the clinic, and the other is the visits that the clinic does. So if all of the providers in the clinic see their 40, 50, 60, whatever the number is, the clinic manager gets part of their bonus, 50% of it. The other 50% comes on the profitability of the clinic. So
Nice. How's that work?
Broken down different ways there. And we only pay quarterly, though. We don't pay monthly.
How's that working for you?
No one's complaining about that
Great.
yet today. But to go back to another point, had a guy just leave me over 30 cents an hour because he didn't understand the value of what he was being paid. And he took a job 50 miles away, and it's killing him driving back and forth, and he's losing money. So
Yeah,
you couldn't get the point across that he was better staying than leaving because he only was focused on a number.
Yeah, do you keep the door open? For those of you who are listening, Bob just spit out his coffee. You might have had some.
No, that was the answer too. Do I keep the door open? No.
Yeah.
We always keep the door open.
Yeah. We do as well. And we've had quite a few boomerangs over the year where people will leave, not understand, and then come back. Great. What else? Thanks for sharing that, Bob.
Sorry about that, everybody.
On my side, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I actually got bit in the butt with trying to do the whole package thing. So I would explain to a new hire, this is the value of your compensation package here. And it had the PTO in there. It had holidays, it had Con Ed, salary and all that. But I guess I wasn't very clear on it. So you got to be real clear. So they thought they were getting, in their mind, they were just hearing, the $90,000. And then when it came down to it, then they realized, oh, well, the salary is only, 77 or whatever it was. So I just got to just make sure I have to be very, very clear, and then just got to break it all down too. So, give them the big package and then had to break it down because that bit me in the butt one time. They thought I was kind of trying to pull the wool over their eyes by saying the package was worth 90 something, but it was. But I know that. We all on this Zoom call know that, but it's tough to get an employee to understand that. But
What happened in the end, John?
so we worked it out before they started. So it worked out fine. And I expect that person's going on 7 years with me now. So now they understand. But again, in my world, I totally understood the numbers and I just kind of thought they would too, but gotta be clear on that. But they need to know that. That's important. Our incentives that we're doing, I've failed many times at different ones. The one I have going right now that's going in its second year is based on units. If they bill in a quarter 2,100 units, It's a $500 quarterly bonus if they build 2,300 units or more. It's a $750 quarterly bonus if they average in a quarter 4.2 build units average, then they get another $250 per quarter. Right now, it seems to be going okay. At first, it was 2 therapists hit it, then 4 therapists hit it. This last quarter, 80% of them hit some kind of that bonus. So it seems to be working pretty good, and it kind of helps me if they're seeing those kind of numbers in billing, then the profit is there. So I'm not just giving away, profit. So it seems to be going okay. I'm very intrigued on. I need to get my directors. You hit on something really big on the directors. Their supervising directors need to be more involved in it. It's not. I don't think we have that going on. The directors aren't talking to them about it constantly and saying, "Hey, how do we get this person in?" Or maybe you should call that patient back to get your people in here. So that will be my next step, is to really talk to my directors at tomorrow's meeting and say, you guys need to be the cheerleaders, and you need to be talking about this and helping them so they don't feel like they're on their own. So I think that would be huge for us to do that. I'm going to roll that out tomorrow.
Great.
I,
Thanks, John.
pitfall that people run into when they use the whole package concept. Let's say that the salary's 90 and the benefits are 25. Okay, for us, that's 115,000, but the bonus is on top of the base salary. We don't take it down by the benefits, and we've seen a lot of people do that and make a mistake by that by doing that.
Thanks, Bob. So couple things to talk about here. First, does anybody have this book? Not have it? Bob, I know you have it.
I have that, yes.
I have not seen that one.
All right. Yeah, John, I'll send this to you. I have one extra copy left. Jeff, I'll have to get you a copy as well. I'll reach out to you personally. But yeah, so who is the book that I use most often in terms of interviewing? I mean, we go through a pretty long interview, 4 different interviews. I get it from there, scorecard system, everything else. So yeah, happy to get that out to both of you for hopping on the call here and participating. So thank you for that. Just
Appreciate
another
that. That's
reminder.
awesome.
Yeah, very welcome. My pleasure. Yeah, it has definitely changed and upped our game across the board in the HR area, personnel area, and private practice. So we'll get that out to you. Another thing is we were always looking for topics. For these calls, this weekly call, the Grow Your Practice Live, if you could go to the chat, and if there's something that was bothering you that you took home with you in your practice, where you were thinking about it at 3 a.m. or on your drive home from work, and you can put that in the chat as a topic idea, that would be greatly beneficial for us to cover in the future. We can always find another expert, or I can share my experience, or we can get other owners to share as well. And the other one was just an announcement. So our deadline for the Profitability Under Pressure program, that was last Friday. We do have a wait list running right now, and I believe, there's quite a few people on that wait list for the next time that we're running that course. But if you're looking for help in terms of profitability, revenue per visit for your practice, we cover all 3 pillars: personnel. We do a deeper dive in implementation of the incentivization program in there. We talk about marketing, and then we also talk about finances for private practice. You can go to getbreakthrough.com/apply. And for the wait to be put on the wait list for the next class. I know some of you on this call have done that already. Yeah, Misty, interested in getting on the wait list? That link, getbreakthrough.com/apply, that would be great. And we'll update you on details with your application on when that next course is starting. Otherwise, very interested in any other topics that you'd like to see covered. You can post that in the chat as well. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah, you even teach an old person something new.
What was the thing I mean, you're 4+ decades in, right?
Just ready to start my 5th. Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Congrats. I know it's tough to give you something that you haven't seen before. Was there one thing in the course that stood out or that you implemented?
I think for me, it's just refreshing things that I know and that I've kind of put aside we're pretty successful at renegotiating our contracts. And I just got a 29% increase in the biggest contract I have, which is 50% of my business. So that's huge.
Congratulations.
We struggle with hiring in California, and I'm sure everybody else does too. But the problem for me is where I live, it's inexpensive to live in California. In relative terms, a house here is $300,000. So when we're talking to somebody from out of state, they equate where I live with Marin County or Orange County, or where the salaries are higher. So just things that I should know, used to know, really able to focus back on that. And a lot of the materials that you hand out are just useful to have. Useful to have, useful to use.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah. Otherwise, we're at time, but thank you everybody for hopping on, being engaged, and we'll see you next week.
Private practice owners, are you tired of declining reimbursements and shrinking margins? Join me on July 18th for the Revenue Per Visit Virtual Summit. It's a value-packed, free, online live event where you'll discover strategies that you can put into action in your practice to boost your revenue per patient and enhance your practice's profitability. You'll hear from industry leaders and private practice owners like Mark Callanan from Innovis, who will be talking about how to increase revenue with cash-based services, and Sterling Carter of Sterling PT and Wellness, who was able to increase his reimbursement rates by over 15% with providers. With more than 8 speakers, 5 hours of actionable training, and hundreds of practices in attendance, you don't want to miss out on this game-changing event. Click the link below to register today, and I'll see you there.